podcast is real life stories from everyday people recovering from substance or behavioural addictions. Please visit the website www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for social media links and a range of books by your podcast host and author, Ren Coy.
Hello and welcome to the Life in Recovery podcast, episode 44. This podcast is with my friend Sophie M, who I met in London 10 years ago, actually, to be exact, at the beginning of my recovery. And she was already 2 years down the line. It's a really great conversation. I loved catching up with Sophie. I moved away from London about 4 years ago, so we haven't actually seen each other since then, but we've spoken a couple of times, and it was really cool to have her on the podcast as a guest. And in good old-fashioned catch-up style, we talk about lots of topics, including spirituality, synchronicity and coincidences, therapy, counselling, psychedelics, love, life, and laughter. So I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed speaking with Sophie. Please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your podcast app and rate the podcast if you feel like we're doing a good job. And don't forget you can support the podcast via patreon.com/lifeinrecovery.
I got sober when I was 26 and I'm 38 now. I'll be 12 in July if I stay sober one day at a time until then. I grew up in North London with my mum and my brother, my older brother, and seemed like pretty normal stuff, really. Normal kind of childhood. Mum working quite a few jobs, very skint, fighting a lot with my brother, that kind of thing. I didn't ever live with Dad until I was older, but he would sort of drop in and out at different points, or we'd spend time with him, semi-regularly. Yeah. But he was in his active addiction, so he was a bit like off the rails. But then when I would see him, it would be kind of exciting, and he'd let you get double the sweets or that kind of thing, because he'd always have a pocket full of cash, whereas Mum was raising us on a tenner a week sort of thing. And I remember from, obviously with the power of retrospect, since I got sober, that my addictive behaviours started young, especially with sugar. I think a lot of people in recovery had a real strong rushing hit with sugar. I mean, it's why they got biscuits in meetings, right? So that you can stave off cravings of alcohol by eating sugar. And and sometimes I was only going to meetings to eat the biscuits, to be honest. But I digress. But I remember from an early age that there were times that I was choosing my company, like choosing which mate I'd go and visit by the ones that had the best treats, so they wouldn't necessarily be my best friends, but they had all the treats that I wanted. And I really remembered that as I got sober, because it also kind of ran into how, by the end of my using, how my company was being chosen, that they weren't people that were looking out for me, but they were the people that had what I wanted to use, or were the ones that could stay up for 2 days straight, 3 days straight, that kind of thing,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean...
You say that about the treats, because I actually just had a bit of a flashback then of some of the AA meetings that I used to go to, because they had really nice biscuits.
Right, exactly. And if they're just putting out the rich teas and it's an hour and a half, you're like, you know what? I think I'm going to mix it up and try somewhere else. Yeah. So when I was about 13, 14, I'd started to smoke fags. And then the summer of my 14th year, I was getting into weed. I was smoking skunk every day in the summer holidays. And I was kind of getting away with it. Mum was having to work so much. Like, I was just out a lot with my mates. And then about 14, 15, I started to get served in, I was going to say pubs. It was one pub I could get into. And I've been quite tall since 14. So, you know, I thought that I looked old enough, but clearly I still look like a twig of a thing and, you know, very naive. But I could get served. And I loved it, but I always threw up. Like I was drinking halves of Foster's, something manky like that. And the thing is that I would just neck them. I would just drink them really quickly because I didn't like the taste, but I wanted the effects. You know, I'd remembered before that, you know, having a can of Lilt on the top of a bus and like getting really giddy and high, and a friend joking that it was like I was drunk. And I remember looking at the can of Lilt and being like, yeah, this is great. And that's what happened then when I first drank. I had like 3 halves of Caffrey's outside the Joiners Arms in Finchley with a couple of mates and a mate's mum. And as we were walking back along, I felt a bit drunk and I felt really giddy and playful and silly. And I loved it because, you know, at that sort of age of being 14, 15 or whatever, it wasn't cool to be like playful or fun, or everything was played down. Like the whole phrase came out of London, like instead of saying, hey, how are you? It was like, all right, yeah, you're right. And like no one was actually asking you, are you all right? You know, like it was, everything had to be understated and you couldn't just be excited. And I really resented that in teenagehood. You know, I was worried about, you know, like Harry Enfield in Chums, when he turns from being a nice, sweet child into a teenager and he's like, oh my God, like they're so unfair. I was terrified. I was like, what's going to happen? I don't want to lose my zest for life. I don't want to stop. Like, I don't want to have to be ashamed of being excited. And somehow, like, starting to drink just allowed me to still be as joyous as I liked. But it also took out the fear of not knowing how to be grown up, or what a woman should be like, or how to be with boys, or, you know, all of that stuff, like not having the right clothes, like having to borrow my cousin's top, you know, but throwing up on it later, you know. And you know, it wasn't until I got sober that I understood the idea that you know, alcoholism is an allergy, like it's an allergic reaction to alcohol. Like we react differently to it. That once I have one, I want another and another and another, despite the consequences. Like if I had eaten a certain type of fish, for example, and it made me throw up, I would never eat that fish again, ever. Because I say, oh, I can't have that, it makes me sick. But because I loved the effects of alcohol and that sense of freedom and careless, like being clumsy and careless, and it didn't matter, I was willing to, you know, be throwing up around the back of a pub, you know, every Friday and Saturday night. That was just how it was. And I was committed to trying to find the right combination that would sort me out. And so I was glad when I found speed. But that was like really strong, really harsh. But it meant that I wasn't throwing up or passing out. And I remember when I was about 15, I moved in with my dad for the first time. My mum was moving up north and she wanted my brother and I to go with her, like for a better life, you know, to be able to have, you know, more money because you could get a cheaper house and all of this. But we just didn't want to go. And our dad piped up, you know, finally saying, oh, yeah, they can live with us, live with me. And I knew he was off the rails. And I was just kind of glad to just have a parent that wasn't keeping as much of an eye on me. Because, of course, at 15, I thought I knew the world and I knew how to be a woman and I knew how to take care of myself because I could get served in a pub. And Mum would have kept a rein on me. And Dad's, being at Dad's was a green light. But it was a dark green light. You know, he was in his alcoholism and it was rough. But yeah, I remember coming home to my dad's flat and my brother was there getting stoned with his mate. And I was really high on speed and alcohol. And he was like, well, do you want to have a joint? You know, it might bring you down. And I was like, oh no, it's okay. Like, I don't want to mix my drugs too much, because I didn't know what it would do. But of course it would have been the best thing, because it would have helped me like bring myself down and go back to sleep eventually, which just didn't happen. Yeah, so I went to college, went to uni, but I started working in pubs and loved it. Like, I could get drunk for free and be getting paid. It was like, why would I go out with other mates when I could just be here and do that? Perfect. So just more.
Perfect.
Yeah, I thought, God, I'm a genius. and what am I saying? Just that, yeah, it was another example of how I was using everything I could around me. You know, I would be using people's kindness or just helping myself when, you know, the offers had stopped. I would just help myself, you know. Or like, I had a beautiful friend at this pub that I loved dearly but didn't fancy, but I knew he fancied me, and I just let him buy me drinks and I smoked his fags, you know. Just not being honest, or not like being considerate, you know, just sort of flirting in a way to get what I wanted, you know. And it was that kind of behavior that, you know, really kind of upset me and put me in danger and upset other people as I went along.
Manipulative.
Yeah, exactly. But because I would also listen to people's problems or give them lots of love and compliments to make them feel good about themselves, I still thought I was a good friend. You know, and in some ways I still was a good friend, but I had my eyes on the prize, you know, and it was the booze, or by then it was cocaine. You know, our boss at this pub, he was totally on it with the coke, and the guy that worked opposite was serving, you know. So, you know, come the Christmas rush in the pub, people would be like, oh, you've got the friendliest staff and they work so hard. And it's like, yeah, we're all off our faces, you know, free. It was a great time, you know. When I was about 17, I was living with a couple of mates, and we'd had one of those weird nights where sometimes I would want to be drunk, but I just couldn't quite get there, or I just wanted to not feel how I felt. But you know, I would just have that kind of soul sadness inside, and we'd, on the way home, we'd witnessed a bike accident, and for a few reasons it brought up some memories, and it also brought up some trauma that I wasn't totally aware of, and at that point I really remember that my drinking changed. Like, that's when I started to drink much more to not feel something or not deal with it, or even to kind of drown in it and revel in the pain or the, you know, the drama of it. Like, not just being about being social, trying to fit in, trying to feel good enough. Am I pretty enough? Am I cool enough? You know, am I enough? It was now, oh God, I hope that's not true. Oh, I can't think about it. Oh, I can't tell them about it, you know. And that was quite a significant time.
What was the trauma, or can you talk about
that? It's something that I've been wondering whether I would talk to you about, because it's just that kind of nervousness and anonymity and things like that. But it was essentially remembering having someone touch me inappropriately, essentially.
Yeah.
And you know, someone very close to me, someone that I just wanted care and protection from, but was also getting these other kind of confusing overlaps. So yeah, it's something that I'm still dealing with today. But yeah, I'll come to that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's what it was basically.
Yeah, because I've talked a lot about childhood trauma on this podcast with other guests in the past, and as my journey of recovery has deepened, and and I've kind of delved not only into my own stories but other people's stories. I mean, I've never come across anybody who becomes an alcoholic or an addict who doesn't have some sort of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that it seems to be the root, really, of what we kind of consider the spiritual malady, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if I had felt safe and able to communicate with people in my family about it, then it may have been a different story. But I'd already got into the pattern of hiding what I was getting up to, because I didn't want to be told off or told to move back to mum or whatever. I was already hiding drug use and being what's the term, I can't think of the term, but like sleeping with people that I hadn't let them even take me for dinner yet. Just I had a lot of low self-worth, but it was just coming up as, yeah, but yeah, being promiscuous, that was the word. I couldn't think of it. So yeah, for sure it's a spiritual malady, and I think as you say, the majority of people that then found themselves in alcoholism or drug addiction have had trauma at the base. But there are equally some people that have had trauma that never picked up a drink or a drug. But it's not to say that if they were to, that they wouldn't then become alcoholics. We can have that propensity. And it's always that kind of nature nurture debate, because even before that trauma stuff came up, I still had that compulsion, and I still had that allergy where as soon as I have one, I'm compelled to have more and more and more and more and more. Like once the train's left the station, I'm not getting off the ride until I'm smashed.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it took a while for this stuff to surface, and then I just pushed it all back down again, as fast as I could, and as much as often as I could. But I think it's like you could look at many other conditions, for example, like schizophrenia or split personality disorder, that sort of thing. It's very common that it is a way to cope with trauma. People dissociate, and I'm still finding now commonly in relationship, especially that at key moments of a tense argument or a tense anything, when I'm then trying to explain what happened to someone else, and they'll say, okay, so what did they say then? And I'll have no idea. Like I dissociate still today. And so I think it's another way that makes me think that, we're a miracle that we stay alive and that we get through this stuff, and that we don't just keep smashing ourselves, because plenty of people do.
They do, and I think that the people, I mean, this might sound like a broad statement, but again, this is just an observation throughout my kind of life and my recovery, is that I think those that don't have some element of trauma, and obviously trauma is subjective anyway, but those who don't really have that, they tend to, I think most people go through some sort of a drinking or drug career, even if it's only short-lived, and then a lot of people just grow out of it. A lot of people like kind of spend their early 20s getting smashed, and then they kind of meet somebody, settle down, have children, and kind of get a normal job and toddle off into the sunset. Whereas those that don't do that and carry on like I did, and just the party never ended, when I kind of got to recovery and did the work, I realised I've got a lot of underlying stuff that needed to be dealt with.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I also find, like, looking back in my experience, especially let's say around when I went to university, you know, there would be some friends that would occasionally get really quite pissed. But there would be other times where we'd be out for an evening and they've had a few and they're like, cool, I've got that lecture tomorrow. I'll see you later. And off they'd go. And I didn't get it. But I also just sort of struck those people off my list of like the ones that could really, that were there for me, like my comrades, you know, like, are you with me or not, you know? And like, don't waste my time. Like, I used to get so wound up when my mates wanted to take ages to get ready and they wanted to just go to some nice wine bar and have a few choice, overly priced cocktails. I always think of it as a dog on a lead that is like panting because they're just like overreaching to get that eighth of a step further ahead than your arm can reach. And it's that like they're choking themselves to get further and further, whereas some dogs just happily trot along at your pace. And that was the difference between me drinking and some of, you know, my mates drinking. I've found as the years went on, I just had less and less patience for people that wouldn't be at my speed.
Yeah, definitely. I can relate to that. Yeah.
You know,
if you're not going to keep up with the pace, jog on.
Yeah, and get your own, you know, as well. So I had then developed into like working at clubs, and you know, just there was this last club that I was working at where I'd start my shift by cracking a Red Bull and drinking half of it and then sneaking vodka into it and having the buzz of like, yeah, I've nicked it, but also thinking like, I'm really smart, you know, like I just thought I was a bit of a genius, you know. It's like, no, you're just a thief and an up and coming alcoholic, you know. But I was like, God, I've got this adult life licked, you know. And but I you know, I was living somewhere that was dodgy. I didn't have bills in my name. I wasn't going to the dentist. I couldn't hold down a healthy relationship, you know. And the thing is, as well, is that alongside this, I had creative opportunities that I was just messing up. You know, like I did a drama and theatre degree. You know, I love to write music and play songs, and I was an actress, and I was, you know, presenting on a radio show, and like I was doing all these different things and doing a lot of singing and backing vocals for people's albums and things like that. And I worked at Cannes Film Festival. Like I got you know, a job where I was helping to edit a script and was taken to Cannes a couple of times and all of this. But I was just messing it up, you know, because I was on the second Cannes trip, I was given €500 to last me 10 days, you know, for food. And I was maybe having a meal a day and I was just spending it on vodka.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have accreditation like the other people did. So like, you know, I hadn't worked in the film industry yet. So why would I be let into all the pavilions? But I just got some kind of pretend tag that I would, you know, they're all wearing them around their necks with these like legitimate cards. And I would just kind of flick it over my shoulder, you know, like businessmen do when they're so busy that they can't put their tie back down. And I would just bowl into these places, you know, and it worked. And I would have these great conversations and I would meet these producers or whatever, but it was just bullshit. And then they'd say, okay, call me tomorrow and blah, blah, blah. And I just didn't, you know, I just didn't do it. You know, the poor guy that spent money taking me there, you know. And yes, so there was, my life started to split into two where if you bumped into me in the street, I'd give you all the highlights of, oh yeah, I'm editing a script and I was singing on this and blah, blah, blah. And aren't I cool? But the other reality was I'm in fear a lot of the time. I'm using drink and drugs all the time. I very rarely pick up the phone. I especially don't if I don't know the number because I'm doing dodgy stuff and I don't want it coming up. I'm not calling my grandparents back. my teeth are falling out, you know. And I was just, it always made me think of Dale Winton on Supermarket Sweep, and he had a cardboard cutout of himself, and it was like, I've got this cardboard cutout that I show people, and I'm having a whitey down the wall behind it, you know. and that was how I felt.
It's funny, isn't it? Because we think like we've got the cheat codes to life when actually we're just completely failing.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, I'd been brought up to work hard, and I'd always had a job since I was about 10. And I you know, I got my degree, I got a 2-1. You know, I put myself through uni. I had 2 jobs to fund it. Like, I was resilient, and I wasn't work shy or anything like that. So in some ways I looked like I was really functioning highly, but I was also really in a mess. Like, when I see photos now of me, you know, 10 years ago to 15 years ago, in some ways I look younger now than when I did. Like, forget the laughter lines or whatever, but there was a toxicity in me that was just showing in my face and skin, and it just didn't look very well, you know. Yeah.
I've posted a Facebook. I posted a picture on Facebook actually a few months ago, and it was my passport photo from, I think it was 10 years ago, and my passport photo now, and I look younger on the one now.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Bizarre, isn't it? Like, it's just, how can that be? But yeah, like exactly what you just said. It's the toxicity, and like it's like there's the frown on my face as well, and you know, I look dark, and now I look light, and kind of, and that's exactly how it was. Those were dark times, and these are happy times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of darkness to it, and the thing is that I was always trying for the light. Like, I got into raving as well, and I, you know, because I'd experimented along the way, but once I'd found like ecstasy or MDMA and raving, you know, going to Peach, Camden Palace, you know, all of that, I really thought, okay, I finally found my tribe, and I've found the way that I want to dance, and because I love to dance, and I found the way that I want to feel connected and united with people in this world, you know. And it worked, and it was amazing, and I had an incredible time. But then, of course, it runs out, you know, you get the terrible Tuesdays, and you know, you just feel like I wanted to be like a snake, where I could just change all my skin at once and just come out all fresh and clean. You know, I wanted to be able to take my brain out of my head and just clean it in some soda water or something. You know, it was just like, I was so rancid, you know.
Well, what goes up must come down, and it's like it's a synthesized spiritual experience, isn't it? That's the only problem with it, is that it's so real when you're in it. Like, you know, the first time I ever took ecstasy, I just thought, this is the greatest thing I'm ever going to experience, and and everybody should do it all the time, and I'm going to do it as often as I possibly can. And then 3 years later, I was in a black hole of depression.
Right.
You know, it's and I never thought that you could get those same highs naturally. I didn't think that was possible, but actually in recovery, I've realized that you actually can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm grateful for those experiences, and you know, I tripped on acid a few times as well, and all of that, and I'm grateful for them because, yeah, they really were very powerful synthesized spiritual experiences. But they also, you know, because I smoked a lot of weed, you know, a lot throughout as well, that, you know, I was always looking to the trees, I was always looking to the sky, and I was always really moved by that connection. And but the way that I think of it now is that taking drugs to get that way was like a firework, like a bang and a crash and a flash of light, whereas having natural connection with my spirituality and my sense of a higher power is like a very soft, slow opening of like a flower in bloom. You know, it's more delicate. It takes more energy in a way. It's slower and it's subtler, but it's true and it's pure. And so I'm glad for those experiences, but I'm also just really glad that I didn't go mad. You know, there's plenty of people that took acid, flipped out, and never came back.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and when I think about a lot of the times when I was raving, like there was always like the euphoria and everything, but I was always on the knife edge between euphoria and abject fear. Like, am I coming up too hard? Am I going to die? Or even just thoughts like, are my friends really my friends? Like, do they mean it? Like, are they saying, like, because I go into paranoia, you know, all of that. And it was, you know, I was just so often really struggling to control my mental health. Like trying to control my mental health with drink and drugs. Yeah.
Well, there's that scene in the movie Human Traffic, isn't there, where it's like 6 o'clock in the morning after the night of raving, and and he's sat in the lounge with that bloke that he's been with all night, and then all of a sudden he's like, the paranoia comes on him, and he realizes that this person isn't his actual friend. It's just somebody that he's like been with. It's just a friend that he's made for the night. And I used to get that all the time, you know. And then, like you said, then you start questioning your actual friends, you know, the people that you even spend your days with, that you're out raving with. Are they my real friends? Do they really like me? Is this all just synthesized bullshit? And it does drive you mad. It's almost like the line between enlightenment and insanity is very, very thin.
Exactly, yeah. And then in Human Traffic, they all chime in, that's paranoia. They all just sing it. Like, yeah, absolutely. Like the first time I tripped on acid, I was with my best mate and I was with my partner at the time. And we went out to these fields and like, you know, seeing the gods, seeing the trees, like just so spellbound. But also I was struggling with the fear that our whole relationship and our whole friendship had been led to this moment where they were just going to bring me to these fields and leave me there and I would never return. You know, like that is horrifying.
Yeah.
It's just, oh my God, like, yeah, absolute, you know, the brink of euphoria and insanity, like absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, even in recovery, about a couple of years ago, I actually did. I mean, I never did any psychedelics in addiction, and then a couple of years ago, it was about 5 years ago when I started researching for my book, and I started doing a bit of research into psychedelics because Bill Wilson had gone down that route, hadn't he? He'd done experiments with LSD in the 70s. And it was actually our friend Tom who introduced me to the idea of ayahuasca. And I was like, the first thing I said to him when he told me about it was, I just said, "You must be absolutely insane, mate." I said, "That is a relapse all day long." Anyway, long story short, I kind of researched this for years and years and years, and eventually I took the plunge and I actually went over to Mallorca and I actually had an ayahuasca ceremony experience, and I did a couple of ceremonies, and it was an amazing, life-changing experience, which wasn't addictive in any way, shape, or form. And I definitely, you know, like for anybody that is seeking, for anybody that would need some proof of a higher power, I would certainly say that it is an avenue to potentially look at. But years on now, I can look back at it and I can see that what you said earlier about the natural way of having spiritual experiences and opening to a higher power, it's much longer, but it's much more real, because it doesn't matter what experience you have with medicines, drugs, whatever you want to call them, they are all in your mind, and they don't last. You know, you can have these absolutely huge, which I did have the biggest spiritual experience I've ever had, but at the same time, it's it's been and gone. You know, it's something that I can only attribute to using those medicines, whereas the ones that I've had in recovery through meditation have been more profound because they've been naturally occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, you know, our earth has created certain plants and certain things that do elicit different trips and experiences, and I don't think they've been created by mistake. And you know, if people are wanting to explore that, or like you wanted to have that experience, then like absolutely, like I think it's really wise for people who are prone to addiction to still apply caution and research like you did. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, some of the most spellbinding experiences can come from these things. And or for example, like the use now of cannabis oil. You know, without the THC, like cannabis has incredible healing properties. Like touch wood, like I'm of good health, but you know, if I had a certain chronic illness that cannabis oil would help me with, I would take it.
Yeah.
You know, I just have to be careful with certain things, like, you know, when I had a bad back years ago and I was taking painkillers, and sometimes it was like, are you really in pain, or are you now just in the habit of taking painkillers? Like anything that I partake in, I have to, you know, apply caution to. But, you know, there are some life-changing experiences that are there to be had. But you've made me remember something. I'll jump ahead by saying this, but I want to say it as I remember it, because the thing I realized once I got sober, like once it all came crashing down, was that my senses are enough, you know, to touch, taste, hear, feel, sense. Like they are astounding, but I was always wanting to make them bigger, brighter, happier, or I wanted to revel in my sadness and depression longer. But the world is amazing enough. Like going for a walk around the park today, it was stunning enough. I don't need to be stoned or on anything to connect with its beauty. But a couple of years into sobriety, I'd got mugged and I had a really bad head injury. And the first day I went walking outside, I even had to tread my feet carefully, because if I tread too hard, my head would like really go. And so some of my senses were damaged in mobility, but I remember the colors being so vivid and everything being so completely stunning that I just had tears rolling down my face. And it really felt like a God-given moment, that I'd gone through something really traumatic and horrible, but here was God. It was like there was a spider web on a bush with some like misty dew on it. And it was so completely perfect in its creation that I was just faced with such purity. And I would, back in the day, I would take drugs to be able to feel that way about it. And instead now, if I pay enough attention, I can anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the ego mind, as I term it, gets in the way, doesn't it? I mean, I've had a similar experience when I did a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation retreat last year, and about 5 days into the retreat, I'd kind of reached a place of what I'd classed as kind of ego disillusion, where my ego defenses had certainly loosened, and it was incredible. It was the same experience as you. Like everything was like in super HD, and you know, I was looking at things as though I'd never seen them for the very first time, like a leaf on a tree and spiders in webs and, you know, all these kind of things that you just completely take for granted. And the beauty of them was just, it was like revelatory that all this beauty is around me all the time. But my, you know, there's like almost like a haze, isn't there, to everything, because you kind of, I think it's because your attention is taken away by your thoughts all the time. You're so much concentrating on what's actually going on in your head that you're unable to view the world actually as it is. And I think that these practices like yoga and meditation and mantras and, you know, whatever else kind of has this effect, this kind of almost like a relaxation effect of the thoughts and the mind. Unless you're practicing something like that, you kind of, well, my experience is I'm kind of walking around in this fog all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's really typical, isn't it? Like if we're in self-centered fear, you know, you tend to be looking at the floor more. People are getting on your nerves. Someone's cut you in front of the queue. You know, like if it starts to rain, you're like, well, it would rain, wouldn't it? Yeah, because God is predicting the weather just for you to help you like indulge your bad feelings. But then like take another day and, you know, I don't know, it's your birthday, you've got laid, you know, you've been made breakfast, you go out, the sun's shining and you're going, hello, Mr. Magpie, how's your wife and kids? You know, and like letting everyone on the bus. And it's like, really, what's changed? You know, it's only inside you. And what I learn to do as much as I can now, and all through recovery, like, you know, even through the worst times or the most like harrowing times, that I look up and I look out and I always search for beauty in the world. I just always look for it. You know, even in these difficult times that we're having now and people are nervous of each other, you know, seeing that cute dog, seeing that little kid doing this, looking at that flower and just embracing all of the beauty that is around us, because, you know, what's going on in my mind can feel like the most important thing in the world, but it's just a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely. Well, it's an inside job, isn't it, as they say?
Yeah.
What was it that brought you to recovery then, that brought you to your knees, so to speak?
So my dad had got sober when I was like 21, and when I was about 25, I'd come back from India. I thought I was going there to meditate and be all pure and zen, but I tried more things out there than I tried in London, you know, and I'd, you know, come back with a shaved head and about a stone lighter, which I was delighted by, but it wasn't from healthy eating. It was, you know, from whatever belly bug you get when you're there. I can't remember the name of it. And I just was like coasting. I just didn't go back and rent anywhere. I was just sofa surfing and diving about and getting myself into dodgy places and dodgy situations. And my dad was, you know, sat me down and kind of talked to me more about alcoholism. And I sat there and talked to him about, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic, but I know I'm greedy, you know, like this. And but anyway, there was like a series of unfortunate events where I essentially burnt the bridges of where I could stay. I wasn't staying in a safe place. And I was considering getting back with an ex, even though I could barely bother listening to him for more than 20 minutes. But I was feeling sorry for him because his mum had died and I loved him still and I was trying to take care of him, but he wanted me to sign to say that we were going to live together and have babies. And I was like, I can't stand him anymore and I have to leave, but I didn't have anywhere to stay. You know, all these different things, like I just wasn't giving myself the most important thing, which is a safe space to live. And I was just using my money on drink and drugs. And I'd come back from Cannes Film Festival thinking I'm all la-di-da, even though I was essentially homeless. And all these bridges had burned. And I had decided I wasn't going to drink this day. And I went to this Clissold, I can't remember what it was called, a festival in Clissold Park in Stokey. And I wasn't going to drink. And I had one sip of a beer of a mate's. And then I had one puff on a joint. And my mate left and I had the chance to go and stay at a friend's house who wasn't drinking. I had the chance to stay at my auntie's house. And instead, I just walked into the pub in front of me and saw people I knew and just got ratted and met up with this guy that I'd met in Cannes Film Festival that was like twice my age, ugly as sin, but like really good to talk to. And, you know, about politics or writing or scripts or, you know, all this sort of stuff. And we just got on it. And I ended up back at his house because he had a bottle of wine to share with me, even though I was already ratted. and I had a joint, which is, I'd never normally do that when I'm so pissed, but it's just that greedy thing. Anyway, I'd thrown up in the bathroom, and I thought, I hadn't done that for years, but I'd done it all the wrong way around, and I thought I was on his couch, and I woke up with him sort of trying to get into my pants, and he was really just not the man of my dreams in any way at all. And I really thought that he was a friend that I could trust and that would respect my boundaries. And I woke up feeling so disgusted with him and so full of dread. But the thing that broke my own heart was that sense of dread was so familiar. I had been in that situation too many times. I'd been in that situation where, like, maybe I just wanted love or a hug, and I ended up just like being slept with. I wasn't choosing this, and it was so corrosive to my soul. My inner child, let's say, I wasn't taking care of myself. And the next day I met up with a friend, and I said to him, I said, the thing is that I wanted the wine, and I could see it, and I went into Tesco's to try and get some juice to like just try and rejuvenate my broken soul, and but it was £3, and I didn't want to spend £3 on myself buying juice. And that really small little thing just showed me how twisted I was. I must have spent, I don't know, 50, 60 quid the night before on booze and buying people drinks, but I wouldn't buy myself a carton of juice to feel better. And it was like, you're twisted. This is twisted. This is really twisted. And so, that, and with being depressed and trying to stay with this guy and all of that, I eventually just picked up the phone and called my dad, and I said, Dad, I think I've got a problem. And he said, I've been waiting for your call for about a year, and I got on a bus the next day or the day after, whatever, coach down to where he lived, and he ferried me around meetings there, and that's where it began.
Yeah, nice. It was me. I made a phone call to my dad too.
Right.
For exactly the same reasons, really. So yeah, I can completely relate to all that stuff. It's like I said before, it just gets darker, doesn't it? And enough is enough. But nobody can tell you when you're gonna hit your own rock bottom.
Yeah, exactly. And my dad was the last person I wanted to ask for help for. Like, he was the alcoholic. He was the one that had let down his kids or been violent or, not paid maintenance or, he was the mess. And I wasn't going to have him tell me I was anything, because he was worse, full of resentment, of course. But actually him being honest about his state and about AA helped me see what AA could do, which was to bring him back to being a man of integrity, someone that turned up, someone that did what they said. Like, he'd call up and say, I'll be round in half an hour. And he actually did it like that. Like, and would do it all the time. Whereas for the first 21 years of my life, that just wasn't the case.
Yeah. So where were you? You weren't in London then in your early recovery?
Yeah, I mean, that was just for about a week or something like that. And then I came back up to London. Yeah. Still wasn't really staying anywhere. And my dad's mate had ferried me round to a few meetings, bless him. And then this one day, I'd been given a daily reflections book, and I'd had just a real sort of, head fuck of a day, for lack of a better phrase. Sorry, I'm maybe swearing too much. And I opened the daily reflection on that day, and it described exactly how I was feeling. It was exactly about that sort of having expectations of other people, but not expressing them, and being resentful towards them. And, I was just tied up in a knot. And I was always looking for higher power through when I was using, like with synchronicity or serendipity. And this was a moment for me that really felt that. And so I decided to go to a meeting, and Dad's mate couldn't give me a lift that day. And he said, well, you really should get yourself to one. And I was like, oh, really? I thought everyone in AA was meant to help each other. Like, just really didn't get it. And God bless him, because it was important for me to make my own journey and get myself through the door.
Yeah.
And the chair had cancelled, and a young woman stepped up and did a chair. And that was the first time I truly, truly related, because all the other chairs I'd heard were like old men talking about losing their wives and kids. It wasn't for me, really. Yeah. And this woman shared, and I decided I was going to share back. And I thought I knew what I was going to say. And I got really nervous, and I opened my mouth, and it was as if my voice came out of a different part of me. And it was just like a deeper part. It came almost like I had a different vocal cord connected to like my root. And it was because it was just really the truth. And it was so full of fear. And I didn't know how afraid I was before, because I would drink and used to not feel afraid, But that made me know that I was in the right place and that I should give AA a go. And 6 weeks in, there was a house party where I was now staying. I'd moved to a mate's place, and I told everyone, I don't drink anymore. I'm just living life on life's terms, actually, like this, full of like obsession of the table. There's always the table with everything on it. And then mates offered me a line, and I was like, oh, go on then, that doesn't count, knowing it would. And then, of course, I really wanted a drink, and I just waited for everyone to leave a room for a moment so I could bolt some down. And that was the last time I had a drink, and that was 2008.
Nice one. It's interesting, the synchronicity thing that you mentioned is still my higher power today, is or at least is the indicator of my higher power. Whenever there's a synchronicity or serendipity or spiritual signpost or coincidence even, I always see that as a sign that my higher power is kind of giving me a nod and a wink.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really feel that. I really do. I always have. And
it's weird that though, isn't it? Like, I mean, I actually wrote the second book that I wrote, which was called Anonymous God. The subtitle was synchronicity, coincidences, synchronicity, serendipity, spiritual signposts, and psychedelics. So I wrote a chapter on each kind of bit, and when I was investigating it, it was you still can't quite, well, it's not something that you can get your head around because it's just so bizarre, but it clearly indicates to me that that everything is interconnected, obviously, in such a way that a higher power is undeniable when you kind of start investigating this stuff, because how could it ever be possible that there isn't a higher power for these things to be happening to everybody all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you start to think about something you might want to do, and you start to voice it, and then the more you've voiced it, let's say like I was thinking about going to Brazil, and then I get on a bus and someone's talking about Brazil, or then I see it here and I see it there, and maybe it's like just that you're looking for it more, but someone said to me, like, luck happens when preparation meets opportunity, that the more you're kind of gearing yourself towards something, the more it's going to more easily come to you. So not necessarily just law of attraction either, but there's been beautiful synchronicities in my life, and the biggest one I had in early recovery was with my sponsor. I met her about 3 months in, and she just really spoke in a way that made sense to me. I found there's a lot of language that goes with AA, and a lot of phrases that just aren't normal. It's not a normal conversational style, because the book was written so long ago. And so it sometimes felt like I wasn't in on the lingo. And this woman just spoke in such a way that I just got it. And the first time I went to her house to start reading the book, as I was leaving, I walked past her child's door, and my surname was written on the door. I was like, why have you got my surname written on your door? She was like, that's my surname. Like, she'd married into the name, and like, it's a big Irish family. It's not like, oh, you're my cousin, but it was just like a really mad synchronicity, because I haven't met anyone that I'm not related to with this surname. But then later down the line, as I started to go through the steps and started to talk to her about my life and my history and where I lived and all that stuff, wait for it, man, it turned out the flat I lived in with my dad and my brother, that was such a, dark place for me. When I left it, she moved in, and that was her first sober flat with her partner. Like, oh my God, like I still get goosebumps about it now, like how the same four walls could be such a place of promise for her, when it was such a kind of, it wasn't for me, It
was your own prison.
Yeah. And it just showed me, I just had a great idea and it's just gone out of my mind. No, that was it. I was often looking for synchronicity and serendipity, and I'd find it when I was stoned, because I'd just really be zoning in on it. Yeah. And I sort of felt when I got sober that I would lose those things. But that was a real big sign that I still had that connection. And or that, I thought I wasn't going to laugh anymore. I thought that I was just going to be bored, and I'm 26 and I'm in these weird rooms on a Friday night. Like, what am I doing with my life? But luckily I met women that I could just like have the kind of laugh, when you laugh so much, it's like you've been hit in the stomach, like that kind of cackling laugh. And I needed that early on, because otherwise it's like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, the laughter in the rooms is massively infectious and definitely kept me coming back. The synchronicity thing, though, it's interesting that you were kind of aware of it, because I'd never even heard of it before recovery. I mean, it was a complete revelation to me to read about this phenomena that that can't be explained, but it's just so real. I mean, and then when the more I looked into it, the more it started to happen to me. And as I said, I wrote this book about it, where it was like there was detailed stories in there. But after the book, I mean, one of them that happened, which, I mean, wait, this will blow your mind. So when I proposed to my partner Adele, sat down at a table in the Savoy in London. We'd gone for afternoon tea, and I had the ring was in my jacket pocket, which was on the chair next to me, and I was trying to work out when was going to be the right moment to propose. And just as I was about to do it, and I was kind of building up the courage, I said to Adele, I said, wouldn't it be nice if, because there's a black ebony piano facing us, and I said, wouldn't it be nice if they had a piano player? Anyway, 2 seconds later, this woman, all dressed in black, walks out and sits down at the piano, and she starts playing Beauty and the Beast soundtrack, the theme tune to Beauty and the Beast. Well, Beauty and the Beast is Adele's favourite Disney movie.
Oh, bless.
So Adele starts almost crying, kind of tears up a little bit, and I said, what's wrong? And she went, this is Beauty and the Beast. Well, the ring in my pocket was wrapped up in Beauty and the Beast wrapping paper.
Oh my God.
So I said, are you serious? And she said, yeah. She said, this is my favourite music. So I said, I got out the package, the present, and I gave it to her, and I said, you can open this now. And she opened it, and then I asked her to marry me.
Oh my God, that's
can you? I mean, it was like, honestly, I mean, my head literally nearly exploded at the time. And funnily, one thing that happened to me years ago, which similar to what you said about the lady moving into your apartment. It turned out that my ex-wife's mum and her dad had bought my mum and dad's house off them.
No way.
So my mum and dad moved out of this house, and it was them that bought it.
That's so trippy.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? So all these things, like when like, and I think what a lot of people do is a lot of people just brush them off, and they say, oh, what a coincidence, but it's just way too big and way too phenomenal for it to just be a coincidence in inverted commas. Like there's clearly something much bigger going on, and like the direction of your life is not random.
Right. Yeah, right. Absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, I just love what you've told me about, needing to build up the courage, or like finding the right moment to propose, and that, that it couldn't have been laid out better for you. Like that she would even maybe ask, did you pay that piano player? Like that's just so divine and beautiful.
She did ask me that, yeah.
Right, I love it. She's like, oh, you're smoothie. Like, no, I promise. It's the universe. I didn't do it. But the thing is, for me, is that I wasn't brought up with religion. And so, but I knew that I had a spiritual connection, and I wanted to find my way. And so I always saw that synchronicity and serendipity was a connection to higher power and nature, but also like I'd seen ghosts or spirits or orbs. Like I've had different experiences like that, but I also really connect with the sense of being an empath, or maybe it's being codependent, but like I think that we have an incredible ability to see somebody and to know them on an intimate level, even if they're just someone on a bus. Like we might be making a judgment, or we might be able to really have a sense of their spirit, so I think really, as we walk through the day, on any given moment, we are picking up on so much information that we just don't quite describe or obtain as something to be useful, because obviously in this modern day with technology as well and internet and all of that, we're so constantly distracted. So that's why I was so delighted when I got sober, that I could pick a higher power of my own understanding. It wasn't going to be prescribed to me. It wasn't going to be pushed on to me, but it was just understanding that me of my own will got me on my knees in this state, in this wreck, in this soul heartbroken state. And I have to look outside of myself and to be given the permission, essentially, to say you can have God and God can have you. It doesn't need to be through any religion. You don't even need to practice anything specific, but this connection is real, and you don't have to deny it or try and brush it off as some weird coincidence anymore. And that was such a beautiful gift to be given. And I'm always eternally grateful to AA for making me realize I had that.
And what was your journey, or what has your journey of recovery been like?
Wow, it's taken us this long to get there, right? We're like, let's not go through all the war stories, but then it always takes a while, right? I suppose we've been touching on it.
Yeah, we've been talking about recovery all the way through as well.
Yeah, I'm only messing. Yeah, it's been quite a trip, so getting sober at 26 and I'm 38 now. Like in many ways, you could look, if a societal questionnaire was going to rate it, I wouldn't score many points in terms of like, yeah, I'm not married, I don't have kids, I don't own a home, or I'm not necessarily climbing up some big ladder, but my life has just become so much richer and fuller, and so much, that I have real quality friendships in my life, and a lot from before I got sober, but a lot in recovery as well. And I thought, my rock and roll kind of, wild and free, but actually lost soul life, I thought I was going to miss it. But 6 weeks sober, I was playing in a music festival in Sweden. I'd never played anywhere before, really. And I was still having opportunities creatively, and I fell in love a few times and learned different things through that. But there were hard times as well. Like when I was 2 years in, I said, I'd got mugged and I'd had my head really badly damaged, and at the same time, my cousin had died young, and like I had a few events in succession that had really knocked me, and my second year was really hard, because I think the first year you can kind of be flying on just the benefits of knowing yourself more and just being glad to greet the day and get up early and be in this world and be of use, right? And I was really low, and I'd gone to see my friend in Brighton in like February or January, like in the winter, but it was a really bright day, and I'd gone and sat at the sea, and I'm a Pisces, right? So I love the water, and I was feeling very, very low, and it was quite possible that I'd have drunk again, and it was like the sea gave me a cheeky wink and was like, come on, like just get in. And so I jumped into the sea in winter, and I was like, my heart was like, I'd never felt my heart go so fast in my life. And my friend was like, you're doing it. I was like, I'm getting out, I'm gonna die. And but doing that, I came out of there like so reinvigorated with life that it shifted me out of this depression I'd gone into, and it made me laugh hysterically. And it was just one of those moments that I was thinking of earlier when we were talking about different kind of awakening experiences that I really needed. And it's having that connection to nature and listening to being drawn to it rather than being drawn to distraction all the time,
Yeah. It's interesting as well, because my daughter's a Pisces. She was born on the 29th of Feb.
Yeah.
And she absolutely loves the bath already.
Yeah.
Just made me think of it then. Because when you said, "Oh, I'm a Pisces," I just checked. Actually, I just googled it. So I was like, I'm sure Alice is a Pisces. And then, when you have one of those brain fart moments where you can't quite remember. And, and I was like, oh, no wonder she loves the bath.
Yeah, we love the water, and we're dreamers and hopeless romantics.
Oh, good.
We're very adaptable and able to change, and Pisces are good.
Yeah.
Good Pisces. Trying to go out with a Pisces when you are a Pisces, no. You're just swimming around each other's tail. It just doesn't go anywhere. just to let her know in 20 years when you allow her to date,
I'll make her aware of that. I was just thinking as well that around that time, that second year of your recovery, was when you must have met me, because that was my first year of recovery in London, and I think we met fairly early on because we were going to all the same meetings around North London, weren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe it's been that long.
I know, it's been a long time. Yeah,
it really has. So that was 2, 3. Third year, it was like magic number 3. I'd got on a course I wanted to do. I'd got the fella I wanted to be with. I'd got the flat I wanted to have, and it was all kind of high sailing. But, those things fall down, those things change, all of that. There's a lot I've found that I needed to learn, and I'm still learning, that, you put the drink down and there's a lot of rebuilding for your self-esteem. And there's a lot of rebuilding for understanding what patterns of behavior you're still bound by, be it that you're not good at expressing your needs, or taking care of others at the detriment to yourself. Like, I found out in recovery that I'm codependent as well, and I went to CODA as well.
Yeah.
And I've recently started going to ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, because there's always more. There's always more unfolding, like, more layers. Yeah,
I've got a book actually that was. Let me just. Bear with me 1 second. I read it It's one of the things that I read it every morning. The Language of Letting Go by Melody Beattie.
yes.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's a really good book.
Yeah, I've got that, like with the daily readings and things like that. Yeah, I've read some of her things, and Pia Melody as well.
Yeah.
And at the moment I'm reading Raquel Lerner, Living in the Comfort Zone, and it's about sort of finding your own sense of self, or by whatever trauma you might have come through, like what patterns you might have, that kind of thing. And something I read the other day, she had said, because of things that I'd gone through that I don't want to be too specific about, but that's why you have a sponsor or therapist, and that's great. Like if you and I were in a room by ourselves, I'd probably spill the whole thing, but I want to be able to protect myself in this forum.
Of course.
But she had said someone with my background would confuse male affection with flirtation. And I really found that, like, I didn't have a high ego that I thought everyone fancied me, like, because I always had problems thinking that I wasn't pretty enough or very beautiful or thin enough and all that kind of stuff, like growing up. But that I would be so confused if a man was kind, because I thought they would then want something from me, and I'd either be really abrupt or just fall in love with them, and they're like, no, we're just friends. I'm not like that today, but it's really interesting to read these things, to be able to, I don't know, come to a partner knowing what you're bringing.
Yeah, well, that was actually one of the reasons why I did go down the psychedelic route for a short period of time, was because of the promise of it rewiring those well-worn grooves in the brain that were very, very habitual. And I think that my experience of it was that it did work. It definitely worked, but I think that you would have to keep going back and doing more and more and more in order for it to maybe completely rewire those parts of the brain. And actually, I kind of came to the conclusion that I was going to do it, continue down the 12-step route and do continue with any types of kind of like talking therapy or somatic therapy that might help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've shown ourselves that we're teachable. Like, it is possible to train neural pathways and create newer grooves that are deeper than the ones before. Anytime you used to be upset, pissed off, happy, joyous, whatever, you pick up a drink or a drug, right? And now instead we just don't do that, and haven't done that for years. And we either pick up tools of recovery, be it a meeting, literature, picking up the phone, sponsorship, sponsees, like all of that stuff, or we just can deal with it writing a step 10, or we can just let things go and let things slide. Like, we don't have to drink or use anymore to deal with
chocolate.
Or I mean, one day at a time. Yeah, I know about you and your love for chocolate, and I'm with you. I'm more of a biscuit woman myself, and I just don't buy a packet of biscuits because I know I'll eat them all. It's that simple. If I'm going to buy a pack, I need to be prepared for the fact that I'm going to eat them all, and that's all right.
That's exactly what Adele does. She says she doesn't buy any packs of biscuits because she'll just eat them, and she just knows that. And I'm like, well, I know that I'll eat it, but I buy it anyway.
Right, exactly. But like in jumping ahead a bit, but I suppose it doesn't really matter. Like in lockdown right now, no, in the past year, I'd picked up smoking cigarettes again, and I hadn't for years in recovery. But this trauma stuff was still coming up. There were still conversations I needed to have. I started to kind of beat myself up, like I wasn't doing my recovery properly if this was still bothering me. And it was so wonderfully loving that someone would say to me, just because this is still hard, it doesn't mean you haven't done the 12 steps properly. Like, AA was incredible at picking me up, getting me clean and sober, getting me to be in this world, to repair relationships, to re-educate myself, to do all these amazing things, travel the world, do all these things I wanted to do. But there are some things that you need deeper work in therapy, in other fellowships, and these things take time, you know. But anyway, so I'd given myself this deadline, like I've got to have this conversation and I'm going to sort this out. And I was having major panic attacks. Like I was having flashing temptations to hurt myself. And I'd never had that, even in drinking and using, like ever. And I had to just really be gentle and I was like, I'm going to smoke, like, fuck it. Like I'll pick up 1,000,000 fags before I pick up a drink or a drug. You know, that's it. That's a fact. And a couple of weeks ago, something came up. I've been taking care of my granddad, and he told me a story, and he doesn't realize the impact of what this story told me, but it told me a whole other level and a whole other area of this thing in my family that was just so much worse. And it made me so angry with him. I was so angry with him. And he's 95 years old, you know, like he didn't know. And I was going through so much, and I had a couple of calls last week with my therapist, and I was telling her how much I wanted to smoke fags because I was having all these really strong, you know, violent thoughts again. And she was like, just go and have a cigarette. She said it's going to cut that receptor off and it's going to help you calm down. And it's like, yeah, so I'm smoking again right now. I'm smoking for a few days. I've got a bit of space. I'm staying at a friend's place for a few days because it's empty. And it's like, I'm really glad that I can love myself enough to take care of myself and eat well and do all the things I need to do for recovery, but allow there to be just a bit of wriggle room sometimes with cigarettes, with sugar, buying something online I don't need. Like these habits still might be a way that you're acting out. But at the end of the day, right now, when push comes to shove, I'll choose those over getting wasted, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to give ourselves a break at the end of the day. I mean, like, I spent years and years kind of like beating myself up over the fact that I still, you know, overeat and still like, yeah, compulsive shopping and, you know, and other compulsive behaviors. And actually, like, the reality of the situation is, in terms of obsessive compulsive behavior, I'm 1,000,000 times better than I was 10 years ago. And but I still have those behaviors, and you know, they're not. They'll probably never go. You know, they'll probably always be there in some way, shape, or form. And B, I don't think the point of recovery is for them to go. I think the point of recovery is for us to become more accepting and of ourselves and comfortable in our own skin, and just, you know, be okay with who we are. And if who you are at the moment is smoking, then just be okay with that. And like you said, you know, you're not harming yourself. You're not harming anybody else. You know, you're not making anybody else's life a misery through drinking or using drugs. So it's just the lesser of two evils, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the steps aren't there to beat ourselves up with, but I think sometimes I could feel that pressure. Like there might be certain ways that people would speak, or I would feel like there was, I don't know, different cliques, or, you know, it was just my own sort of low self-worth, but thinking I'm not doing this properly. Or like just another way that inner voice can say, or the ego can say, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
And but what I've been blessed with in recovery is to be able to reconnect with really who I am, like really who I am as a pure being, and as this soul, this body, this mind, that I am my own best friend. Like I have beautiful people in my life, but I'm so glad to be the person I am, and I'm so glad to be able to, whenever I need to, just put my hand on my heart and just say, it's all right, I'm going to take care of you. Because the thing is that I just didn't take care of myself for many years. And so there's a part of my, like my inner child or whatever, that didn't trust me, you know, and like being sober and taking care of myself and staying sober a day at a time is rebuilding that trust with myself, you know. And it's amazing now the things that you hear people cope with in sobriety, never mind what I've been through, but, you know, people go through many different things and they don't pick up. Like, that's a miracle. Like we are miracles, like for whatever we've been through, to still be alive. There are so many people that need recovery that don't get it.
Well, alcohol was the medication, wasn't it? I mean, when people say it's a symptom of the illness, I don't think it is a symptom of the illness. I think the symptoms are the anxiety, the depression, the mental health issues, the emotional issues, and I think that the alcohol and drugs is an attempt at medicating those symptoms, and it just becomes a crutch, you know. And obviously, with them hijacking the dopamine reward system in the brain, you know, if you do something and it makes you feel good and it blocks out all your emotional and mental health issues, you're going to keep on doing it, aren't you? And you're going to get addicted to that thing if you keep doing it, because it's an addictive substance. So I kind of like simplify it like that really now.
Yeah, amen. Absolutely. And the one thing I'm really glad to still have a strong connection with from all those raving days and from all those days of carnage that is as ever present now is music. You know, nothing actually changes my state faster than music. You know, you put one piece on and we could cry, and you could put another piece on and we'll dance our asses off, you know, and it shifts me into another space. And I love now, you know, I run now, I do yoga, I love to dance, and I find movement meditation like really good for me. And the fact that, you know, we can shift into other states and not just sit and dwell by using these other things that are, it doesn't have a side effect other than like joy, you know, like natural serotonin.
Well, that's what the mystics say, isn't it? The mystics say that when you kind of get rid of or put down all the addictive behaviors, the things that you crave and the desires, that joy will just arise sporadically anyway. What does life in recovery mean to you?
It means, wow, what a question. What does life in recovery mean to me? Like, what does it mean to me to have a life in recovery? Or what does life mean to me now that I'm sober?
Well, you can answer the question however you like.
Okay. Life in recovery means to me connecting with my heart and my soul and trying the best that I can a day at a time to be in the stream, be in the flow of that synchronicity and serendipity that we talk about, being open and aware to really revel in all the glories that this world has, not in the riches, not in the clicks and the likes, but the nature, the people, the family, the animals, everything that thrives and breathes. And being able to be of use and be of service, being able to comfort, being able to listen, being able to hug people, being able to really ask yourself, what is your dream? And being able to find ways towards them, even if it doesn't go the way you want or it doesn't happen in the time that you want. Being open to God's plan instead of it being my own. You know, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, and just really reveling in the glory of what it is to be alive, and not needing to make it any shinier or brighter or faster or more exciting than it already is, because I've had more of a rock and roll life sober than I have when I was pissed. I was just pissed in North London. I've been all around the world now.
Yeah, same. That's beautiful. That. And what would you, if you had one piece of advice to give anybody that was listening that might be struggling, or maybe somebody who's never even entered recovery and is thinking about it, what would you say?
I would say that there's a glimpse inside of you of an idea that there could be a different way. And you're right, there is. And if you think about it like a pilot light for when a boiler's going to heat up the water, right? The pilot light is such a small flame, and it's so precious that if you can get in and just stay sober one single day, there's a chance that flame can keep burning, and there's a chance that it can take up and it can fill and it can heat and it can bring warmth. And so often people come in and they just go, I don't care. And it's because when we first come in, we don't necessarily care enough about ourselves because our self-worth is so low because of the things that we've done. But you're not the things that you've done. And you're so worth it. You're so worth the effort. You're so worth all the love and kindness and grace that you can give yourself to just give it a try and to just put down whatever it is you're using and seek the help and ask for help, because you're worth it.
Lovely. I think we'll leave it there.
Thanks so much. It's been beautiful to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for that. And let's not leave it too long to talk again in the future.
Amen, brother. Lots of love.
You too. Take care, love. Thanks very much for listening. If you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, please see links to a range of mutual aid organisations underneath the podcast link. And please don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. And you can also support the podcast now via Patreon at www.patreon.com/life in recovery. And you can donate anything you like, really. A couple of pound, £10 a month, whatever you feel that the podcast is worth to you. Is it worth a cup of coffee? So yeah, anything would really, really help to market the podcast and spread the word of recovery far and wide. Please visit www.lifeinrecovery.co.uk for my books and social media links. And if you'd like to get in touch, email me, rencoy@lifeinrecovery.co.uk. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.